Hey, it's Guyby from Vital MX. Welcome to the 5th episode of The Inside Line, presented by Thor. This week's guest is Bevo Forti. We've heard Bevo referred to as the czar of motocross, and with a career that spanned 45 years of everything from wrenching for privateers and factory riders, and then making the jump to the goggle side with Scott and 100%, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who's seen and done it all like Bevo. The good part for all of us is that he also loves telling stories, and he's got plenty of good ones to share here. If you're checking this out on Vital MX, there are a few photos under the podcast player, so you can see some of the things that we reference. If not, you may want to head there to check it out. As I mentioned before, the Inside Line is presented by Thor, celebrating 50 years of racing heritage, the first, the forever, Thor Motocross. Also, Chaparral Motorsports has been helping riders outfit their dirt bikes for more than 30 years. Today, Chap Moto offers professional advice, online and in-store, helping you find the best riding gear, parts, accessories, and tires for all your power sports vehicles. Visit chapmoto.com today. That's chapmoto.com. All right, with the sponsor stuff out of the way, let's dive in. We're back with another episode of the Inside Line podcast from Vital MX, presented by Thor. This week's guest is Bevo Forti. What's the right way to pronounce your name?
Bevo Forti. You were right. Most people try to make me French-Canadian, call me Bevo Forti, but that's not it.
Okay. How you doing today?
I'm 100%, obviously.
I had little doubt of that.
So. No, I'm good. I mean, I've been coming here to Unadilla for 45 years, so I really enjoy coming up here. And basically, I enjoy going to every race after you've been doing it for 45 years. Obviously, you're doing it because you love it, and I love it. And I'm very fortunate. At one point in my life, I said to myself, I'm never going to be rich, so I might as well be happy. And motocross and motorcycle racing has kept me happy.
That's a lot of seasons, a lot of years. How many races total in there? Do you have any idea?
I probably have a couple more than Roger. I'd say we're first and second because, you know, when he was doing the GPs, I was doing the Nationals, the Supercross, the Inter-Ams, the Trans-Ams, and about 1 year I think we did like 46 races.
That's wild, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen a lot. I mean, you know, I came here when this track first started, and it was like how every racer says, geez, I'd like to race on a golf course. Well, this is the closest thing to a golf course. When they first started, you'd come here, the grass would be at least 12 inches high, and by the end of the day, it was the roughest thing you ever saw.
And probably didn't get graded in between races, did it?
There was no such thing as grading in between races. And in fact, there was a lot of places where there was obviously no water trucks either.
Yeah. So you're not only have 12 inches of grass, but all the bumps hiding under there.
Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, at that time I was a mechanic for John Savitsky, who was one of the top privateers at that time. And I was in the single area out here walking backwards and ended up in a hole and rolling onto the race course and somebody missing my hand by about 6 inches.
Wow. So how'd you get started in this?
I got started, I bought myself in 1970. I got me a Suzuki Savage. It was I guess a version of a street and trail bike today. I went out in the woods by my house. I live in the coal region in Pennsylvania, so we had unbelievable riding. I was new at it, and here comes this little kid through the woods, just going crazy, and it was Savitsky, and I ended up riding with him that day, and ended up breaking my headlight, my fender, and a couple bruises on my knees. So that's how I got started, and then we got hooked up, and basically, his parents had nothing to do with his career. They loved him and they helped him, but he used to get all these guys' bikes prepared. At that time, you know, a bunch of guys get together and go to a motocross race. Unfortunately, they were a little older, and he was really enthusiastic. He was like 14 years old, 15 years old at the time, and what happened is they'd go out on a Friday night or Saturday night and then decide about halfway through Saturday night, we're not going to be able to do Sunday, and here's this kid all ready to go. So I went out and bought myself a 1950 Ford pickup truck and took him to the races. And first race we went to, we opened up the door and put a blanket over it, and that was our canopy. And what we had for tools was the little Suzuki tool bag that came with the deal.
Yeah.
And we parked next to this kid, his family, they had a big trailer riding Montesas. The kid must have had 4 bikes, came out all decked out. Well, Savitsky won and he got lapped, so we figured Savitsky had something going for him.
Well, you and John hung out for years, and made it up to the national level that way.
Well, I stuck with him through his privateer days for 6 years. As a matter of fact, I didn't want to. I had a couple offers at that time from the European factories, but I wanted to stick with him because the first time we went to a national was at Pocono Raceway, and that was, I guess, in 72 or 73. And being so naive, we showed up and tried to sign up for 2 classes because we raced 2 classes everywhere else. They told us you can only race 1 class, and the amazing part about it is at that time they were 45 minutes plus 2 motos. He went out there and worked his way up to like 4th, passing all the factory guys, and then obviously being a young kid, he ended up like 6th or 7th. Now today, if they would have saw some kid just come out and get a 6th and 7th, a rider, man, he would have just went off into the sunset with a factory ride.
Right.
But at that time, they were basically picking, if you won Saddleback, you were going to be our national champ in California.
Yeah, right out of the backyard.
They weren't looking for us because the real funny part about our whole career was that when we were riding Bultacos were usually basically mom and pop shops. So our Bultaco dealer was also a undertaker.
Okay.
So he had the same phone. So we would be back in the Bultaco shop with the phone, and we'd ring and go, Bob's Bultaco, and the people go, I'm looking for Miller's Funeral Home. Oh, excuse me, Miller's Funeral Home. I mean, so for us to get a factory ride at that time, riding out of a little shop behind a funeral parlor, it wasn't like quite winning at Saddleback.
Yeah.
In fact, Stormstown, Pennsylvania, which was a great track in Pennsylvania, Gary Bailey did a school there. And he was on Bultacos at the time. We were on Bultacos, and it was funny because he's giving his school, and John was on the fence just looking at it. And he goes, hey, you guys can't be here. Well, unfortunately, the next day, John beat him at the track. But, you know, every kid has their home track to beat. It's pretty tough for somebody to come in one time and beat him. So that's basically where it all started. Being a mechanic with him on Bultacos, on Makos, on Can-Ams, on Suzukis. And then finally, Bob Hanna and him got hooked up together. And it was pretty good because Bob wanted somebody to train. But it's not like today. He didn't train and ride with somebody that he knew could beat him.
Right.
Okay? He wanted a training friend. And that's how we got hooked up. And at that time, he'd sleep in Hannah's room, and I would sleep with Keith McCarty in his room, in different beds.
Yeah.
But it was that's how it all started. And then finally, he got a ride with PDQ at the time with Arnie Beeman, and it looked like that was going to be a good ride for him. And then I got an opportunity to go with Yamaha as a mechanic for 3 years.
Who'd you end up wrenching for there?
Well, I wrenched for Donnie Cantalupi.
Okay.
And then on my 3rd year, they really cut the team back because the industry went a little south in 1980, and I ended up being driving around their parts truck. Like, they put all the works parts in a truck. At that time, there were a lot of titanium, new stuff. At that time, titanium, carbon fiber. In fact, I was fortunate. I worked on the first Yamaha water coolers in America with Cantalupi. That was pretty interesting.
Oh, that's cool.
Back then it was when they gave, like, works bikes were a $50,000 package, and it was pretty incredible. I went there to work at Yamaha, and they go, I go, where's my exhaust pipes? And they go, in that box. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a second, I'm a bubblegum welder. I'm not one of these guys with the bead,
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty interesting. We had we did everything. We had to do the suspension ourselves. We had to lace the wheels. We had to true the cranks. We did it all, and it was pretty neat. And that first Yamaha was incredible because it had the radiator on the front,
right,
and between in the whole steering stem, there was like 13 O-rings.
Oh, wow.
And the only time you got to see if they were leaking or if they were in right is when they were leaking. And, I had a guy that would land and sort of slam his front wheel, so I always had some drips on my fender.
Right. Well, back then it was only a water-cooled head also, wasn't it? Nothing in the cases or cylinder. So.
Yeah, it was the pioneer days of water cooling, and it was pretty interesting. And then they came out with the power valve, and that was interesting because they told us that if you're working on the power valve, it has to be facing the truck. We don't want anybody taking pictures of it. I mean, at that time, it was like so secretive between the factories. Have your front wheel turned a little bit. We don't want them to take a full-length picture so they could measure it.
For geometry.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it was incredible. I mean, and then I remember one time in Binghamton at Broome Tioga, we're sitting there, and Max Suzuki, the liaison for the factory, comes up to us and goes, "Oh, had a problem with second gear. You must change." Okay? Well, this is like 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Saturday night. I mean, you're not, your bike's all ready to go, and they're telling you to take the bike apart and put in second gear in. It was a whole different time back then.
Right. Well, box van days were completely different.
Unbelievable.
Traveling circus, plus you're building the bikes, plus doing all the travel.
Well, I'm going to tell you, before that, okay, when we were privateers, when we first came out, this whole motocross scene was more of a bunch of young kids traveling the country, basically having more fun than and getting paid. And everyone thought we were way behind the Europeans. We weren't behind the Europeans in riding. They were ahead of us in training, And if you ever, Roger, the last 15 minutes of a race could be in 17th, and he'd pass everybody.
Right.
That was his trademark. Watch Roger the last 15 minutes of this race, and it was a whole different time. And it really didn't take till Carsmaker came over here and rode. And when he rode, he was just beating everybody. And then Hannah decided, well, the first race that Hannah rode was the Battle of New Orleans. And it was so hot there that day, okay? And I used to kind of like chew tobacco, but I don't do anymore, obviously. Mm-hmm. And don't do it, kids.
Yeah.
But I had it in a Gatorade bottle, and it blew up in the front of the truck. That's how hot it was that day.
Wow. And
Hannah ended up with heat exhaustion his first time out in New Orleans. So after that, he got into training. And then if he went to like when we went back east, he never went back to California. He stayed in the humidity, never ran air conditioning, And you could see, if you watch that video of the Battle of New Orleans and you watch Jimmy Weiner come in and what he has to come into, a towel on the ground and a mechanic
rolling around. Yeah.
Rolling around and a mechanic saying, "Hey, here's some water." It was such a different era back then. But then the Americans start training, and Bob was one of the first ones. Then you had Ward, then you had O'Mara, and then Bailey, and then all those guys got into training, and that's where it is now. The fitness is real important. But before that, it was just like sometimes the team managers would pay the bar bills.
All those eras that you've seen over the years, is there a favorite era or a favorite time of
I kind of liked when people were paying my expenses and I was making a salary. That was a good era.
Right.
Because at one time we'd go to the Florida series and I was collecting unemployment, in Pennsylvania. So you only had to sign up every 8 weeks. I'd fly home and sign up and go back down and be Savitsky's a mechanic. And of course, I wasn't making any money. In fact, I was living on my unemployment. So because I was basically going to be blaster on construction, dynamite kind of stuff.
Yep.
And then one day he said, "You want to go to Florida?" And I went, "See ya," to
Yeah.
blasting. And here I am. You know, I've been a mechanic, I've been a goggle guy, and now I'm an ambassador
Yeah.
for 100%.
Well, talk about the goggle stuff. How'd you get into that?
Well, Yamaha had in the 80s, at one time we had a 7-man team, and then we went down to a 4-man team. From there, we had that parts truck, and then they decided they didn't need the parts truck. And I think it had something to do with Hanno, and when he left Yamaha, you know, we were pretty good buddies.
Yeah, you guys were tight.
Yeah, we were tight. And so what happened was, there was 3 of us, 3 mechanics that got let go, who got laid off. In fact, the funny story about me getting laid off is Keith McCarty was sick. So I was supposed to work on Lachines' bike that weekend. And these guys are going in. One guy, "Oh man, I just got laid off." Another guy, "Oh man, I just got laid off." I'm in the parts cleaner going, "Not me, baby. I'm working on Lachines' bike this week." Next thing you go, "Hey, they want to see you in the office." I'm going there with like solvent dripping off my hands, going, "What's this all about?" And so, but I did some funny things. I guess maybe I was a mechanic, a serious mechanic. But you know as well as I do, I don't mind joking around. Like the one time, you know, we had my 40th birthday, they gave me a blow-up doll, right?
Gotcha.
So I used to have her and Sally in the seat next to me, you know, when we go driving cross-country. At that time, people actually washed your windows to watch your guy when he's washing the windows and that stuff. And one time, you know, we used to not always have enough ambulances. We had ambulances delays. And it was about a 2-hour ambulance delay, and everyone's just sitting around. So I put Sally on my works bike. Well,
yeah.
I went into when I went into the to get laid off or whatever you want to call it. This picture came up and said, "Do you know what it cost me to keep this out of the magazines?" So I guess, you know, I deserved a little bit of reprimand for that. But I mean, at that time, there's a lot of fun involved, you know.
Right.
You know, and
no social media. It was
no cameras.
Months later.
yeah, like no social media, no everyone videotaping. You know, it was. You could actually do a lot of things that were fun and not harmful, but get away with it. Hannah used to have a lot of pyro stuff. He loved pyro, and he'd bring these quarter sticks of dynamite. They were called whistle bombs, and it'd go and then blow up. Well, one night we're at a hotel and he puts one outside by a tree, puts a cigarette there so the cigarette will burn down to the fuse, right? Unfortunately, this poor old man came there and was walking his dog, and he hears the lucky that, because the dog pulled him away and
oh no,
here goes, you know. I think one of the things I did at one time when I was with Can-Am, this is a pretty funny story. I think it may be somewhere in the archives, that we were on the team. It was Mike Runyer, Savitsky, and Ellis. That tells you how old I am, okay? All right. So we're at Phoenix, and we got a whopping 17th, 18th, and 19th that day for Team Can-Am. So go back to the room, and George Ellis, Jimmy's dad, who was his mechanic, always liked to have a little scotch, not just enough, you know, not like he's slurring or anything like that, just to have a little scotch. So I go in the room, and he looks at me and he goes, "Man, what a great day we had today, right?" I said, "You know what, George, you give me $5, I put that Can-Am right in that swimming," because we used to have a enduro bike in the Can-Am, because they were basically the first guys that had like a big truck, you know, a semi.
Right.
So I said, "You know, George, for $5, I'd put that Can-Am in that swimming pool." And he goes, "Here's your $5. Took my wallet out, opened up the door, clicked it a little bit going in. Next thing you know, pull it out, and Jimmy Ellis then took out the little drain plug on the bottom, and all the water came out, and it was fine. But that's the kind of stuff that went on. I mean, it was fun, and it still is, but it's a different kind of fun right now.
Yeah. So hands dripping from solvent.
Oh,
and
gone.
Then, yeah.
Yeah. So now I come out, and Hannah says to me, look, I'll take a seat out of the airplane, because at that time he still flies, obviously, but he had a 210 Cessna, and he goes, I'll take the back seat out of the airplane, and I'll fly around, and I'll give you $10,000 to be with me. So I could have been the official #1 man friend in this industry. And I said to Bob, I go, Bob, at that time I'm like 30 years old. And I said, Bob, I'll handle it. That's okay. I mean, if something happens, and because they actually had a job lined up for me to be the rep for Wrangler when Wrangler got into it. But unfortunately, because of all kinds of policies, they had to hire a woman and this and that, and so I ended up not getting that job. So I go up with Bob. He lives in Sun Valley, Idaho, and that's where Scott was at the time. And Bill Larson called me over and says, hey, how'd you like to work for Scott? Because obviously all of my antics, I was serious, but I wasn't the guy to say, hey, get out of here. You know, I'd talk to people and all that stuff. And he said, how'd you like to work for Scott? And I said, okay, which was a pretty drastic pay cut. But, you know, I got to do that and did that for 30 years. Yeah. Then, I don't know, maybe I was looking a little too old to be with him or something, but it was really amazing because I was going to retire. And Ludo from 100% called me up and says, hey, how would you like to come with a goggle company? I said, I don't know, you know, Ludo, I'm like 62 years old. I'm not Colonel Sanders, you know. I don't want to start a new career, but I met with him and Mark Blanchard, the other owner, and they asked me to go with them and asked me if I'd, you know, do this and that, and talked to my wife, and she said, good. And 7 years later, here I am as an ambassador.
Well, you've also got second generation going on with John working on 100% also.
John, well, let me put it this way. John Knowles, John Cuso, they graduated from Bevo School of Goggles, okay? When goggles were like, you know, goggles were difficult at one time because, you know, it was, everything was new in technology. Like, when you look at the film system, okay? In America, none of us had it. I go to Europe, and Eric Gabors, may he rest in peace, he has duct tape folded over on the edge, and then taped to the lens, and that's how the visors over the film system came about. I came back to America. I said, "Hey, look at this. We ought to make a visor." So that's how that happened. Like the silicone on the straps. I was signing Terry Cunningham, you know, the 8-time enduro guy, champion, and he says to me, you know, hey, I really like I like to use your goggles, but I want to have a company that listens to what I say. I said, well, what? That's what you know, sure. So that's how the silicone came on the strap. He said to me, hey, can you use something when I'm going through the trees? It comes flipping off. I said, well, Velcro won't work, you know, and they used to have that strap and that little buckle on the back to catch your goggle when it fell off. Yeah. So I said, okay, and this is hard to believe, but I went and got a pair of JT gloves with the dots on, the cotton mud gloves, and cut them up, and my sister-in-law sewed them on some straps. I gave them to Terry Cunningham, and he goes, wow, this works really good. So now we get a bra company to put it on there, okay? This bra company gets the great idea and called up every goggle company and says, hey, this Scott company's putting this silicone on the back of their strap. And that's how silicone on the strap became something. And then, you know, even with the 3-4 layer foams, it was Bradshaw who helped me with that. He had a very big sweat problem. And we got together once again. I pulled my sister-in-law in that knew how to sew. Got me a pad made up, sewed it, And then what we did is we got just not a hard piece, but a real close cell foam on the top of the goggle. And then we would put the feminine pad on there. And then from there, it went from double foam to triple foam, what foam should be where. I was fortunate. I had guys that would try it, and then LaRocco, I ain't putting that on my head.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
And then Stanton would say, well, if I don't see sweat on my goggles, I don't think I'm working. I said, okay, you know. And LaRocco, I'd put 6 tear-offs on his goggle. He'd come back with 5. I'd pull it off in the pits. I go, how does this look? You go, I didn't have time, you know. But it's amazing. And then you'd have Brock Glover, right? Hey, Bevo, there's lint on my lens. I go, Brock, you're going to be doing 50 miles an hour in 5 seconds. It's going to blow off. Oh, okay. You know, but it's just amazing. You know, I've worked with some really good guys. I've worked with Doug Henry. I've worked with Kurdowski. I've worked with Grant Langston. I've worked with Cooper, Georgie Holland, you name it. I worked with all of those guys. And I really enjoyed that because basically that's where the service came from. Mm-hmm. And I taught whoever worked with me after that, service is what counts.
Yeah. Make
sure everything's right, you know. And it's been good for John, both Johns. Yeah. They both have jobs, you know. In fact, John Kuzo, my son, came back from Lommel. He was at Lommel last week. He gets to do some Grand Prix too. You learn. I'll tell you what. Over in Europe, at least in the past, the racers would come up with ideas because they were building their own goggle, you know? So they were doing all of what they needed to do.
Back with the Scott bus and now with 100%, I look at these as kind of like social hubs in the pits now, though. Probably the bench racing that happens here, the people that stop by to visit, all that kind of stuff.
Well, what it is I call it Switzerland, okay? Because obviously we have a couple distributors. So when distributor reps comes in here, I say, listen, we're in Switzerland. Everybody, you're in here just to enjoy the atmosphere. You know, there's Rob Bidas. He comes in. He's looking for an apple. It's over there. What I tried to do, and I'll tell you what really helped my future was my wife, Helen. Because when she would come, and Rob can testify to this, she made some real food. I mean, real food. And it'd be nothing. And I make breakfast sandwiches in the morning, and anybody comes to my door wants one. You know, in fact, I think I own most of the stomachs in this industry.
Yeah, I think you've fed a few people over the years in here.
You know, it's good because one guy, Mike Guerra from Yamaha, used to call me, what's the guy in Star Wars, Kaba or somebody? The guy that everyone just sits somewhere and everybody goes sees him. I don't know his name.
Oh, yeah.
Jabba the Hutt or something.
Yeah, Jabba the Hutt, yeah.
That's what he used to call me. I go, why should I go out there? Everyone comes to see me, you know. They come to see the Pope. So,
that's good.
You know, I take care of them. I mean, they know they can come in here and use the facilities. I have food for them, and it's worked out well. I mean, it's something I'm proud of that I hate to pat myself on the back a few times in this deal, but I did start the first hospitalities out here.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe you've had a breakfast sandwich or two.
I may have had one or two in here for sure. So, you talked about John getting over to do some GPs. I'm sure you spent a little time over in Europe too.
Yeah, I used to do 6 days, and I had a lot of fun with doing that. The Italians, I had a great time with them.
Yeah,
but I used to go to the 6 days, and I used to do a little service over there, and boy, the Italians loved me over there. They gave me a shirt that was basically a get out of jail shirt in Italy, one of their team shirts, and we had I had a lot of fun over there. I had a lot of fun with the off-road guys. You know, I used to go over there with Kevin Hines and Cunningham, and you know, I can go on and on who I went over there with. And probably one of the best stories over there was when we had pink goggles, and pink goggles kind of got a little not popular. I used to take them over. I would give them to the Polish guys. And they just thought I gave them gold because no one gave anything to them. Them and the Czechoslovakian guys, I'd give them. Here comes these guys that are basically in gray,
Right.
with pink goggles on, and they'd come over and they'd go, "Hey, you want some Bevo? What the hell? Excuse me, I can't remember." They used to bring me this Czech beer, and in fact, the Czechoslovakian guys wanted to give me Crystal, which is very expensive. And I'd say, no, I'm not over here for Crystal. I'm here to help you. And, which I probably should have taken now. I might be retired. But anyway, we had, then the one year I was in Italy, and the next year was Poland. So they always had like an introduction. The year before, the Federation from Poland would come in and have an introduction. So I go to this introduction. I'm sitting there, and here comes this guy over to me and introduces himself, and we get talking. He goes, "Do you have ski goggles?" I'm in a motocross race. I go, "Yeah, I got them. I just put a thermal lens in, right?"
Right.
And come to find out, this guy is the head of Polish sports. I mean, the big guy in the country. He gives me this pass when I get to Poland. That we got off the airplane, right? So we get adventurous. Me and Kip Palmer and a couple of guys that,
Mark Correa.
Yeah. We get together. We're not going to the hotel. We're going to find a restaurant. We go find a restaurant. And now we're going to go find our hotel. Well, it's like 9 o'clock. We go into the little town, go around a corner, and there's two soldiers with machine guns in the middle of the road. Okay? So, next thing you know, they say to me, "Why are you out so late?" It's 9 o'clock at night, right? So
the streets rolled up and sidewalks are gone.
Oh, yeah. There's nothing. I mean, there ain't no 7-Elevens over in
Right.
Poland. Because at this time, the Berlin Wall was still up.
Right.
So I pull out this pass, and they go, "Okay, you can go."
Wow.
Just like that. So next thing you know, we're going up this hill in these Polanski cars. I mean, going up this big hill. Get to the top of it, all these bright lights. I thought I was in Hollywood. It said, "Welcome to Czechoslovakia."
Oh. Oops.
Oops, no visa for Czechoslovakia. So that's one of the stories. I had so much fun at the 6 days. It was incredible. Those guys, and they bring their helpers and their families, and we'd hang out. We had a blast. And Mark Correa in Poland, wearing a bright orange vest. You could not believe how many heads he turned around.
Yeah, I bet.
It was crazy. I mean, so like I said, I have a theory about wherever you go, make a memory. Because Larry Myers told me one time, when you're laying in bed and you got all those wires on you and all those veins and you're just laying there, you better have good memories because that's all you got left.
Yeah.
So I try to have good memories.
That's awesome. A little while back, you had told me about driving around in Europe with Eric Gabors.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He was, I don't know if he went faster in his car than his motorcycle. I mean, he was, one time, when like I said, he lived about probably hour away from Antwerp. And he was sponsored by Innsbrucken, which was an ice cream. And I'm saying to Eric, it's like 5:30 and the race starts at 7. He goes, as you know, the famous words of a European, "No problem." No problem. I go, okay. So now we're getting his 500 Mercedes, and we're doing like, whatever, 120 miles an hour on a 2-lane road with big giant trees on each side, like for guardrails. And next thing you know, we pull into the ice cream plant. I go, "Eric, it's like 6:30. He goes, "No problem." Next thing you know, he comes out with all this ice cream that he's going to give to the kids in the pits. We get there, puts his leathers on, boom, he's done. He's gone. And then another time is when I was over there, and It was me and Brock was racing there, okay? And we had this Volkswagen bus. And the Volkswagen bus would only do like 85. 85 it would go. And the next thing you know, okay, all of a sudden, we're getting up speed. We're going faster and faster. I said, Brock, what's up? He goes, I don't know. He looks in the rearview mirror, and Eric is pushing us with his Mercedes. Pushing us with a 500 Mercedes in his Volkswagen bus, and finally had to back out because his car was overheating because it wasn't getting any air. You know?
That's awesome.
And then the first time I went to Europe, I was with Keith McCarty, Motocross the Nations. When it was Motocross the Nations and Trophy the Nations.
It was a 500 and a race and a 250 race.
One week after another. So we go there, and we're in Germany. So we get the bright idea, let's go downtown. So we walk across this this park, and we walk back again. We get in there, and Keith says to me, hey, I smell dog poop. I'll be politically correct. And I go, I don't know. I go, turn on the light, and I'll check. And we're at a red light, okay? I don't know where the light is. I go, open the door. He opens up the door, and here comes a moped. Whoa. Right into
Door the guy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was really amazing. I traveled with Keith a lot, and every time something went wrong, it was my fault. Always my fault. His truck was broke, so he put all his stuff in Savitsky's truck. So we're going cross country. Now they filled it so high that we had a latch on the back of our truck that went side to side. So the load shifted, and we couldn't get in the back. But that's not the problem. The problem is he puts the gas. I put the gas nozzle in the truck, and I go to get something out of the front. He comes walking around the other side. Gas nozzle comes out, and he gets squirted with gas. Now, obviously, you know what gas does to your crotch.
Yeah, it's not great.
He's on fire.
Yeah.
He goes, open up the back door. Can't open up the back door. He's screaming at me. My fault. My fault. So I said, wait, Keith, I got an idea. Got in the truck, went about 35 miles an hour, slammed the brakes on, everything moved up. He gets in there, right? Gets in. Same trip, right? I used to chew tobacco, so I had a Kentucky Fried Chicken cup. So every 5 hours, one guy would go in a sleeper, and then, hey, it's your turn to drive, you know. So I've been spitting in this cup after I drank the soda, right? Okay, Keith, it's your turn. He gets up, sits in the driver's seat, picks the thing up, puts it up to his mouth, and he goes, I can't believe he didn't drink any of the soda, right? Opens it up, and it was just all tobacco juice in there. That was, you know, we're at Anaheim Stadium, right? Before they put the bleachers in, they had the big A in the middle, and the track used to go along that, right? So that was the mechanics area. I'm standing next to Keith. I see this rock coming at me, right? And I duck, and I turn and go to say to Keith, did you see that rock? He's laying on the ground. His glasses are almost broke off, and he's like got a little cut over his eye, and he hands me the board and goes, hey, it's your turn to give Hannah some signals. I go, my fault, because I didn't take the rock to the head.
You didn't take the hit, right?
Yeah. But, I mean, I've got so many things like that were so much fun. And I had a chalkboard. Okay, at the time, you know, we all had those JT boogie boards, you know, that you wrote on. And then after a while, they wouldn't erase. So I got the bright idea, I'm going to have a slate chalkboard. So our undertaker friend that owned Bob's Taco, hey, they're ripping down a school. I'll go get some slate. So he makes me this board. It must have been 30 pounds.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I mean 30 pounds. And I used to have the chalk, and, you know, and I was the only one that could erase it and it'd be out there. But it'd take almost two hands to hold it out there. So I always used to, when I wasn't wiping it off, I put the chalk in my mouth, and McCarty would come up and hit me in the back of the head to get the chalk out of it. And mechanics areas used to be pretty much fun too.
Well, you know,
everything was fun.
Yeah.
I don't know what goes on in there because I spot for television now, so I don't really know.
Well, you have worn a few hats over the years, and TV and things like that too.
Yep, I've been fortunate. I've spotted for TV, and which gets me the get out of jail pass and go everywhere you want to go pass, like all access, you know. And
Yep.
but yeah, it's been good to me, very good.
Well, you mentioned ice cream a few minutes ago, and somebody told me I had to ask you about Hannah's ice cream.
Well, obviously I'm a little bit bigger than the usual guy, you know. And so that means like every 3 weeks you go on a diet, and you're going to start Monday, and then you're going to do it and start Tuesday, you know. So I'm up at Hannah's. It was Thanksgiving. And he loved Haagen-Dazs ice cream. So he's got like 4 Haagen-Dazs ice creams, the quarts in his freezer. And every night he'd go to bed. Before me, I'd sit up, watch a little TV. Well, I would eat the ice cream. Okay? And 4 days later, Bob says to me, I think I'm going to get some ice cream. I said, well, I think I'm going to go downtown. What I was doing was, I was eating the ice cream, filling them up with water, putting them in there, and he'd come down every morning and touch them and go. In fact, he said, hey, Buddha. He used to call me Buddha. He goes, hey, Buddha, I'm proud of you. You know there's ice cream in there, and you aren't eating it. So when he said he was going to eat it, some ice cream, all he was going there was getting 4 containers full of frozen ice water.
That's awesome.
But he was him, Stanton, clean freaks. I ate at Bob's house. I'd take a bite of toast. He'd wipe the crumbs. So I went over to the closet. I took a bite of toast, and I had a one of those hand vacuums underneath my jaw. So when the crumbs would come in, they go right into the vacuum cleaner. Stanton, as soon as you took a bite, he'd wipe your table off. Crazy.
Yeah.
And he was a pyro nut. He loved fireworks. Stanton did. One time we went before Redbud. I think he actually burned his hand one year doing it. I know where to lie. He'd probably spend $5,000 to $10,000 on fireworks, and he had a lake on his farm. It'd be like 50 people there, town people shooting them off. He had a string of fireworks that they used to have. It says for downtime. It was like 10,000, a string of 10,000 firecrackers. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's crazy. But I've enjoyed every minute with him. Every rider that I like, I enjoyed, I worked with, and to this day I still do.
That's awesome.
You know,
earlier I was talking about this being sort of the social center. A few years ago, I was at a race and happened to be in here, and Brad Lackey came in, and some of the bench racing, there were no microphones around, no recording going on, but some of the stories that were going back and forth in here were awesome.
Oh yeah, Bad Brad used to have a great end of the year party after the Trans Ave in his house. I mean, it was great.
Well, was Livermore near the end of that season?
I believe it was Sears Point.
Okay, yeah.
Sears Point.
Yep.
Yeah, Livermore story is that's where Roger's front end broke. But
Right.
the same day, some idiot decided, if you ever been to Livermore, all it is it's in between like a canyon. And some idiot decided to roll a Jeep tire down from the top. You can't believe how fast that thing was going, how big that looked.
The velocity, right?
Oh, yeah. And then the same day, after the pits, it was a lot of fun. I mean, after the race. See, everyone had firecrackers because you go through the states that was legal and you'd have them. And somebody threw a firecracker, and this one spectator went up and grabbed one of the mechanics like he was going to do something to him. And it was sort of like the carnival. In a carnival when you'd yell, "Hey, Rouge," that everybody'd come over and help you. Everybody got around and settled it down because, in fact, we said, hey, if you really don't like what goes on in the pits afterwards, don't come in, And then also at Livermore, the Richmond Ramblers used to have a real nice mini bike race, okay? And, I mean, this was huge. I mean, there was probably 3,000-4,000 people at these. So DG would come with their race bike. Miller Mano had their race bike. Who else? There's all the R&D, they all brought up their tricked out mini bikes.
Well, I remember Tripes and you
we
guys.
just so happened to bring a lot of people don't even know about this bike. It was called a Chiron. It was a Bultaco mini bike. And the deal was that it had the same bottom end cases and same cylinder as you could actually bore that cylinder out to probably a 360. That's how thick the cylinder wall was. So we got this idea at the funeral parlor, Bultaco shop. We put a 250 Matador engine in it, okay? Now, the wheelbase on this thing is you touch the throttle and it just flew right up out of your arm. So we go to Rich and Ramblers. Only guy in the world that could ride this bike was Marty Tripes. He goes out there and smokes them, Got us enough money to get home, as a matter of fact. And that was the major win for Bultaco that year. But then Preston Petty, who used to obviously made Preston Petty fenders for all you youngsters, he got on it, and he couldn't ride it. He couldn't even get it off. And we tell him, put it in. You have to start off, and you only can use we only put 3 gears in it, so third, fourth, and fifth. So that's all you could use.
Anything that was manageable.
Oh yeah, and he couldn't believe the Tripes won on that bike. Marty Tripes, he'd come up to Pan and go, "I'm beating you today," and he gave him a run for his money, and sometimes did beat him.
Well, it's funny, over the course of this, I think we've talked about 4 brands that aren't even around anymore.
Oh yeah,
between Can-Am, Bultaco, Mako, Montesa,
Poog.
Yeah,
Poog.
Well, and more, yeah,
right, yeah,
quite a different time.
Oh yeah, I mean, basically, when the Japanese came, all the privateers that run these, or all the European riders, privateers and factory guys, just could not wait for rain because their air boxes were terrible and they'd drowned out. And Suzuki's clutches were terrible. They'd burn up, And if you were a privateer and you were getting like a fifth, you were top 3 that day.
Yeah.
Because of that would be the days of Mickey Kessler, Frank Stacy, and and Savitsky, the top private guys then. But it was at one time in Delta, Ohio. You can see that track. It's off the turnpike in Ohio, and you would not believe there was a national there, but there was a national there. They had 4 different motorcycles for Marty Schmidt to try that day, the Hondas. And we were there around Bultaco.
Wow.
From a funeral home.
Yeah. That's awesome.
But it's, it was crazy. It was a whole different time than it is today.
Yeah. Probably picking a rider out of that all that time would be impossible. Are there a handful of guys that really stand out to you? As
far as racer?
Racing and just, I don't know, racing, amazing people, the real characters of those times.
if you're going to go through the ranks, obviously, in my time, you started out with, like the Lackey, and Billy Grossi was good, and then, Marty Tripes, Jimmy Ellis, they were all fast, and then you had cars makers. Then the Tony D era came on, and he was really good. And after Tony D, it was maybe about that time. I don't know. Bob Hanna got in there, and he dominated for a long time. And then you had, then you go to the Ricky Carmichael's, the domination he had, Ricky Johnson's domination, Stanton's domination, and then you had Bradshaw and Matasevich that were really good. And Georgie Holland, Guy Cooper. Georgie Holland was really... It's really hard when you have 2 guys going after a championship and you're building their goggles.
Right.
I'd go on the line, Georgie Holland, go, Bevo, what, Georgie? What's Cooper having there for a lens today? Because he was racing against Cooper for the thing. I go, don't worry, yours is better than his.
More horsepower, yeah.
But anyway, that know,
but it goes back to
Mickey Diamond. I mean,
yeah.
The story with Mickey Diamond is he was on a Husky, and I was doing goggle service. So Mickey Diamond in Orlando does really good at the Supercross. He's been really good. Now you would think that this would mean nothing today, but I went up to him. I said, Mickey, I've been watching you. You've been doing really well. I'm going to make your goggles for you. You would have thought I gave him $1 million. You know, that was the difference. I mean, there's so many guys. Let's just say there's a racer that I've helped that I liked, and that's why I helped them. You know, and when they would leave because they would be offered more money, I'd say, hey, I really like you, but I just can't afford you. You know, because it got crazy there when we had different goggle companies come in, because Larry Myers taught me this, because I'd go to an amateur race with him. He couldn't walk 2 feet without saying hi, talking to somebody, doing something. And I said, boy, Larry, how the heck did you do this? He goes, you just ought to come down here and let people see actually a face to a product. So I went down there, listened to him, and at one time I actually had racers like Damon and all those guys when the other companies came in. I had Stanton turn down $25,000 to stay with me. You know, because they'd say, "Hey, you helped me when I was no one, and I'm going to stick with you."
They remember, and you get loyalty from that. Yeah.
In fact, I'm probably the one that, again, not to pat myself on the back, but I had such loyalty out of these guys that the other companies start going down to the amateur ranks. You know, and that's basically. Then the offers got crazy in the amateur ranks, and I didn't go along with it because I watched too many kids get yelled at when they weren't performing from their parents. And I said, wait a second, if he falls and the guy goes, hey, we just lost $2,000 or $500.
Right.
How do you think we're going to get the next race? They pack up and they leave. You know how many times I saw people just pack up and leave?
It's a lot of pressure on a kid.
Yeah, too much pressure on a kid. Yeah. Even I saw one day his dad's. I'm looking at this dad, and he's over there with his pocket knife taking a branch off a tree, like a little branch.
Switch, yeah.
And I go, what's up? He goes, I'll teach that kid not to race as hard as he could. I went over to the team manager that he was riding for. I said, you better go over to his pits. And he went over and stopped it. So I guess I made such a loyalty because I wasn't giving anybody anything. I was just there, I wasn't doing contingencies, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
My first contract with Bradshaw was $2,500 or $10 a point. If you go over the 25, guaranteed 2,500, right, I'll give you $10 for every point over that. That was my first contract with him. Doug Henry, I signed Doug Henry in 3 seconds. He was with me all those years, and then he went with, what was the name of that company out of Indiana? The shop.
Oh.
NCY? No,
DGY, Downer Grove, Yamaha.
Yeah. They hired him, and he didn't have to use, he had to use their goggle sponsor. Well, he was on there then when he signed with Honda, I went in the back of his truck. I go, Doug, you're free now, aren't you? He goes, yeah. I go, how's this? Okay, boom. That was it. Yeah. Handshake. Emick had a contract on his desk for 8 months. Didn't sign it. He goes, what are you worried about? I said, I'm not worried about it. They are. The accounting office is worried about it. I'm not.
Right. You have to, yeah. What's our exposure on here?
Right.
Any favorite races that stand out to you, or seasons, or?
Well, the races that stand out for me are, and it's not just the guy that I helped, is when someone comes from way back in the pack to win. And that I always, those are the ones that really stick in my mind. Probably one of the best ones, Han and DeCoster used to have such battles in the Trans Am. Every one of those were incredible. I mean, they raced here at Unadilla. I bet you they bumped into each other and fell down at least 3 times. You know? And
people would lose their minds these days.
Oh, watching them?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they were crazy.
But I mean, now people get close to each other or think about touching each other, and the fans are losing their minds.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Different era.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't know what happened, but when it was back then, I think they wanted to see people bang, you know? And now it's, I don't know, it's different, you know?
Probably maybe a little more dangerous now. You know, you could really hurt somebody.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think my personal opinion is in a turn, you should never let the door open. Because, you know, you open up your door at your house and a stranger comes in, right?
Right.
But
it was almost like you invited him.
Yeah. And so, and the thing is everybody's done it. So, you know, that's how I look at it. Now, crossing over on a jump, now that's dangerous.
Cross jumping, right?
Yeah, that's dangerous.
Right.
But hey, a little banging in a turn ain't gonna hurt nobody. Just pride, you know.
Well, other than maybe Coop and Roxon this year.
Well, that was a freak way his hand went.
Yeah.
You know. But there's a guy. Look at him. What he's gone through. In fact, I went to see Jeremy Martin after Millville. Because that's, believe it or you know, throughout the years, I used to go to the hospital after the race to see my guys too.
Right.
And I went up there, and boy, he was pretty banged up.
Yeah.
But I just got a picture from his mother the other day where he's putting weight back on. He's moving around now. He's getting out of the house. He had a little bit of an infection. That's gone. So he's getting a lot better quick. You know, he's a young guy. He'll be back.
Yeah. No, that's good to see. Man, if you had to pick a favorite, do you like the racing, the people, the equipment? You know, I'm going to guess you're the people person.
I wouldn't be here if I didn't like all of them, would I?
Yeah,
right?
That's true.
I mean, you know, when I was working on a bike, it was interesting. You know, when I build goggles, it's interesting. You know, and I'm a people person. That's why I'm the ambassador for 100% goggles, because I don't know how to use a telephone or a email. I'm a guy that just likes to talk to you, and I'm the guy that likes to read people's voices, like if you're talking to them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what do you do when you text somebody and you're texting them, and all of a sudden they're like, what the hell is he saying this for? You know? I'm not that guy. I'd rather just talk to people, and that's the strength of me. Gift the gab.
How long do you keep doing this?
How long?
Yep.
Well, I got let me put it this way. I just had one son graduate from college, right? I have a daughter that's a sophomore in college, okay? So I planning a couple more years.
Okay.
You know, it's... Besides, I'm 13 years older than my wife, so we're never going down that happy trail on Social Security. So I'm going to try to find us a nice place where after work we can enjoy it. Like, we're thinking about moving to North Myrtle Beach. So, and then I have a son that does pyrotechnical stuff. He does lasers, and that came from this industry.
Right.
Because I met the gentleman that did it at Gift the Gab. I met Ronnie Greco, and he took a liking to my son, had him do a couple fireworks show. Now he's traveling with the Chainsmokers, and he's traveling with this guy named Marshmallow, and he's going on tour with all these groups. And see, so motorcycle racing and motorcycles have been good to me in more ways than one.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, you and Roger are still duking it out for most races, so.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm a lot younger than he is, you know.
There you go.
I've been watching him fall. and crash. I've been standing watching that, so I think all my body parts probably move a little bit better than his. But I like Roger. We'll watch races together sometimes, but he'll be up there where I'm at, and I have fun with him when we're up there talking. I go, Roger, between me and you, there's like 100 years here.
Yeah.
And then we look at each other and go, yeah, and it looks like it too, and no, he's a good guy. I like Roger.
Well, I love these stories, and I know we could spend hours doing this. Maybe we'll have to revisit this again in the future, but
well, hey, we're still in the 70s.
Yeah,
I'll do 80. I've told I'm trying to talk Racer X into doing 2 tribes, but 4 decades of me.
There you go.
Like, what was your favorite, music? At one time it was Led Zeppelin,
right.
Then it was the Barney music because of my kids, and and
the different eras. Yeah.
And what's your favorite book? At one time it was the Road Atlas, So, hey, I'll be happy to talk to you anytime. You know that.
Well, I appreciate the time, and I think we'll wrap this one up.
Don't you want to ask me the question everybody asks me?
What's that?
Who's going to win tomorrow?
All right, who's
somebody wearing 100% goggles?
Yeah,
obviously.
there you go.
And I have a trademark. God bless America.
Thanks, Bevo. Appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Like I said, anytime.
That's it for episode 5 of the Inside Line, presented by Thor. Celebrating 50 years of racing heritage, the first, the forever, Thor Motocross. We also have to thank Chaparral Motorsports. For more than 30 years, Chaparral Motorsports has been sharing its love of dirt bikes with like-minded individuals by offering a massive selection of the latest riding gear, new models, parts and accessories, and great pricing on tires. Visit chapmoto.com. That's chapmoto.com. We hope you enjoyed the conversation with Bevo. That was some first-class bench racing. Look for the next Inside Line a couple weeks from now. In the meantime, you can subscribe to iTunes or Stitcher so you don't miss any future episodes, and you can also go back and check out the previous shows. If you're feeling really generous, leaving us a rating and review always helps. Thanks.